Hello friends, my name is Keisha, and I'm a proud member of the Métis Nation of Saskatchewan. I'm also a survivor of human trafficking. My trafficking began in Canada and crossed it to the United States. I was stalked, hunted, and ignored by the very systems that were meant to protect me. This is why, with my father, Dale Richardson, we started the CARES Project, an Indigenous survivor-led movement for humanity. We are dedicated to exposing human trafficking, government corruption, and holding institutions accountable. The judicial branch is broken. It has failed to restrain the evils that have come upon this republic. Whether it's family court failures, weaponization of the judiciary, COVID-era harms, or human trafficking, the courts have allowed these issues to continue unchecked for too long. One of the most powerful tools we're using is the petition for redress of grievances. These are lawful constitutional actions rooted in the founding principles of this country. On May 19, 2026, a formal petition for redress of grievances was submitted to the United States Congress. This petition is demanding that Congress and the President use the powers under Article 4, Section 4 to preserve this Republican form of government by restraining these abuses pending congressional investigation. Through the CARES Project Action Plan, we are mobilizing people across the United States to strengthen this effort. This petition has been created as a template. If you or someone you love have been hurt by these same systemic failures in the courts or by government institutions, your evidence matters. When you come forward, please bring your evidence along with a copy of the petition for redress of grievances. This helps connect your story to this growing constitutional record being placed before Congress. We are asking you to stand with us. Join the CARES Project Action Plan and help us build a precedent that demands accountability and protects the God-given rights of American families. Our united voices will compel Congress to uphold the Constitution and safeguard our liberties. United we stand, one nation under God. I will close with my favorite quote. The greatest want of the world is the want of men. Men who will not be bought or sold. Men who in their inmost souls are true and honest. Men who do not fear to call sin by its right name. Men whose conscience is as true to duty as the needle to the pole. Men who will stand for the right, though the heavens may fall. Thank you.
Welcome to the CARES Project podcast. Today we have with us Dr. Sanjeev Kumar. Wow. Yes, and you are an OBGYN, and you have been doing a lot of work to help people, and you were then attacked by the government, the weaponized government, and they charged you with some horrendous crimes that made absolutely no sense and so forth. And now you got convicted, but then they ended up having to put this over and had some hearings. So do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what's going on with you?
Yes, so my name is Dr. Sanjeev Kumar, and I'm a double board certified physician. I'm a gynecologic oncologist, which means that I did a OBGYN residency, and then after that I did additional fellowship training in a subject called gynecologic oncology. And in gynecologic oncology, we basically treat women with cancer, complex surgical problems. Even if women that don't have cancer, we look after them if they have complex surgical problems, such as a fistula or a large, fibroid tumor. So complex surgical problems of the pelvis. Within that field, I specialize in robotic surgery, and specifically robotic surgery of complex patients. So let's say if somebody's body weight is 400 pounds, that will be typically my patient, because others find it too challenging for that patient to be treated. If somebody had many different surgeries in the past, they have a lot of scar tissue in the abdomen, in the pelvis, then that will typically become my patient because others find it hard to perform surgery on those patients. And then you have patients who are at very high risk of uterine cancer or endometrial cancer, which basically has become a cancer that has one of the highest rates of death in past 5 years or so. If you look at the national data from 2018 to 2022, uterine cancer has become the number one fastest rising cancer with whose death rate is rising faster than any other cancer
But
in a woman's body.
but isn't this one of the more treatable forms of cancer?
Yes, so endometrial cancer can be treated. In fact, vast majority of them can be treated if it's diagnosed early. If it's not diagnosed early, then you're out of luck. And typically, you don't want any cancer to happen, right? Which is why
Yes.
early diagnosis is so important.
Yes.
If you can diagnose this early, then yes, you can cure it. If you can't diagnose it early, then you're out of luck. Invariably, it ends up killing you.
Yes, and my grandmother always used to say an ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure. So if you can catch it very early, it's better than catching it when it's too late or very late. And if you survive, you have, I mean, usually if you survive it at that point, you have, at a late stage, you have problems for the rest of your life.
That's exactly right. So, uterine cancer, when it is diagnosed with early disease, then we can do robotic surgery and can pretty much achieve cure. Although 2 to 5% of those patients still end up getting the cancer back, however, most of them are cured. But if it becomes stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, then it's a problem. It ends up progressing and eventually taking the life away of a patient. The problem with this cancer is, let's say a decade ago, you were talking about 50,000 cases every year. Now it's almost 79,000 cases every year. That I'm talking about new cases. You know what it means? It means that every 10 minutes, a new endometrial cancer is diagnosed in the United States of America.
But
Every 10 minutes.
this is crazy. This is a 58% increase in the rate of cancer. There has to be a reason for it, because when I sit down and I see something, and if you have a steady rate that's kind of going, you'd expect it to go up with the population growth. But when you go from 50,000, like you said, you have to now what, 78,000 cases, 79,000 cases. That's a
69.
69,000. Okay, so you have a 38
69. Yep.
so you have a 38% jump from one year to the next, and then it's at that elevated level across the board. This is indicative of where you want to sit down and figure out why, and then start going treating it, and looking for this aggressively. Like the prevention stages, like what you were doing, is what you would want to spend more time to find out, and what environmental factors or what changed to justify the jump in this, because things like that generally don't change unless something else changes. And what's going on, what's happening, are they not getting proper testing, did they introduce something, whatever the case may be. But you want to find out and prevent people from dying. That's the whole idea. So this is, yeah. And,
That's exactly right. Also, people may be surprised to know that obesity causes this cancer, um, in almost a direct fashion. So, when you have a rising rate of obesity, that means the cancer will happen even more frequently.
and
Also, what happens is that this cancer is actually more in certain racial groups, such as African Americans have a much higher rate of this cancer, much higher rate of death. In fact, a black woman is twice as likely to die because of this cancer as compared to a white woman. And there are various factors: lack of care, lack of accessibility to effective care, as well as higher risk of obesity, fibroids, inherent distrust of the system. All these factors play a role, and that's why it's such a big problem. And the worst part is, it's getting worse. The
Yes.
rate is rising.
When I sit down and I think about this, like the obesity thing, when I look at what happened during COVID and the lockdowns and everybody's stayed at home, you weren't going out as much, and I mean, I gained weight over the COVID because I was sitting down indoors for a long period of time. Like, I mean, so you're going to see rates of obesity rise from things like this, and then the distrust in the system that you mentioned, like I see it, like especially in the states, like you think of the Tuskegee experiments and all these different things that went wrong, why people distrust the system, which not enough is being done to relieve that from people and so forth. But I see what you're saying here. So you were working in Memphis here, looking at a lot of these disaffected groups that would have been more prone to these cancers. And this is where you were doing your work. I looked at some of your pages and you were engaged in philanthropic work and so forth. So what happened? What did the government come to you and say? Like one day they come in and say, well, you're doing something wrong and we're going to charge you. It doesn't make
Yeah,
sense.
yeah. So basically, what happened was um, the government alleged that we were an outlier in utilization of hysteroscopy services. So let's talk about what is hysteroscopy. Hysteroscopy is a endoscopic procedure where we put a telescope. It's basically the size of the telescope is probably half the size of this pen. And if you take a look at a length of about 4 to 6 centimeters, that's how much length of usually the endoscope goes into the uterus.
Mm-hmm.
So we can take a look around and we see, hey, is there a growth? Is the endometrium looking normal? What is going on? Why is the patient bleeding? Why does the patient have tumors? Why is there fibroid or any other problems? Sometimes people put an IUD in and then they forget. Sometimes that IUD disintegrates. Sometimes you have a growth in the uterus that is called a polyp that keeps growing, and then part of it sloughs off, part of it is still inside and can keep causing problems and eventually can turn into cancer. So for things like that, we do this hysteroscopy. And hysteroscopy is an outpatient procedure that can be easily performed in the office. So the government alleged that our clinic was utilizing more service than other peers, as they call them. What they never said was that we were also treating way higher number of patients. So they presented our billing data. They presented our billing data, but they conveniently did not highlight the fact that the underlying patient population was also much larger. I'll give you an example. We treated more than 9 times the number of patients as compared to the next available comparison group. When you looked at our billing and what we were actually paid at some of the lowest rates amongst the comparison group. So our per procedure payment was actually the lowest in the group.
So you, just
In,
just
in their database,
just to
yeah,
get this clear, you had 9 times higher rate of treating patients than the next comparable group of people.
exactly. So in their database, um, in one of the main calculations that they were trying to do, we were treating 4,700 patients, whereas the next peer, the comparison group was treating 550. That's how much the difference was between how many patients we treated. But they did not highlight that fact. They did not highlight that fact. They only highlight the billing. Okay? But when you looked at where the billing was coming from, you had legitimate reasons of billing the way that we were billing, because we were just treating too many patients. We were
Yes.
open 6 days. We were not asking people whether they had insurance, whether they didn't have insurance. We had an open door policy. We will treat, even if you didn't have insurance, we'll treat you. We will never say no to you.
Yes.
That is our call.
And
So that's how we were serving people, and that's how they came after us. Um, Another thing that they did was they excluded Medicare Part A payments, and compared our data to hospital systems. So when you exclude Medicare Part A payments, hospital payments are already excluded because hospitals get paid from Medicare Part A. Clinics get paid from Medicare Part B. So they took our data from Medicare Part B and compared it with the so-called hospitals after excluding Part A payments. That naturally shows our bar to be higher than the other people's bars.
so what
So all these kind of irregularities happened, and it was just a stunning turn of events.
I took statistics in school, and I'm sure you probably did as well. When you're when you're doing statistics, you can't misrepresent the information because you're creating a contrast, a comparison that isn't accurate. They don't make sense because it's like you're comparing apples to oranges. They're not the same thing. Sure, you can have two different types of apples and compare those, but comparing to something that doesn't even make sense, because what I'm hearing you say is that they're manipulating the statistical data and then presenting it in a way that it doesn't make sense, and they're using it to lie. Because what when you have, I can understand if you have the same baseline population and then you have 5 times the rate in the same treating patients, you're going to sit there and say, okay, what's going on here? But when you're treating 9 times the amount of the next person, of course you're going to have a higher number because you're treating, your volume is higher. It's consistent because you're getting a higher rate of people that you're treating. That makes sense. So, like, I don't understand why they would come in here, because there's got to be another reason why they were coming after you, because that, what you're telling me, is not a legitimate reason. It's not.
That, that's right. That's right. And so, there were many, many different types of allegations that were leveled against me and my clinic. What I'm highlighting here is, and I'm so glad that you have a background in statistics because it's so rare to find, right? So let me tell you, in the entire sampling, they never made sure that what they were analyzing was actually representative of our patient population. They handpicked, cherry picked 9 patients out of more than 5,000 patients. And at some point, they released an instruction that, hey, try to find patients that show obsessive use of hysteroscopy rather than just regular randomly selected patients. Also, you'll be surprised to know that in order to show a higher utilization of hysteroscopy, they excluded thousands of patients who actually didn't have hysteroscopy. So that's how, the data were tweaked
That
to build a strong case
this
for
is
themselves.
this is highly unethical behavior. Like, the, the statistical analysis that they presented, it's not valid. It is not valid. You cannot, you have to take an adequate sample size, and it has to be randomized for it to be effective. If you're going and targeting people, you've just destroyed the analysis. There's no analysis there because you've controlled it to get a desired outcome rather than allowing the data to speak for itself and allowing it to be properly conducted and then interpreted. You just this is this what I'm listening is stage after stage of doing something deliberately wrong to get a desired outcome, and this should never be tolerated. This is not.
I think your sentence on the desired outcome makes so much sense because I'll tell you another example. Their data analysts went through so many steps, like they will copy and paste data in different sheets multiple times, and then fill in even the values were filled in uh, by this analyst on an artificial fashion. Now, there's a golden rule on data analysis. When you have a database, you don't manipulate it. Because the moment you start copy pasting, even if one cell is missed, your entire analysis is wrong. And they did that multiple times. Copy from here, paste from here. Oh, this variable is not present here, so let me manufacture a variable. These cells are actually empty. Let me actually put in more values in here. Things like that. Also, they included billing for cross claims, duplicate claims, defective claims. So they just piled on as many layers of data as they could rather than actually going for accuracy. So, what happens in a duplicate claim is, let's say the biller is submitting a claim, right? And for whatever reason, if the claim gets rejected by the insurance, maybe somebody's date of birth is wrong, maybe somebody's account number is wrong, right? So the billing company will resubmit those because these claims will be rejected by the system. And they included everything, even the defective claims. Then there are crossover claims. Crossover claims are if a patient has, let's say, multiple different types of insurance. So let's say a patient has Medicare, Medicaid, they submitted a claim, and then let's say that claim did not get paid. So the clinic submitted the claim to a different insurance company in the hope that it can be paid. So they counted these instances as two different claims. If somebody had three different types of insurances, they counted those as three different instances of claims rather than just one single claim. So it was just, very, very inaccurate analysis. As we say in the statistical world, garbage in, garbage out, right? If you
Yes.
feed the system wrong data, you're going to end up with erroneous conclusions.
Well, yes, but when you start seeing a pattern of behavior, you're looking at this and it's deliberate because you can't keep making the same mistake over and over again. It becomes to a point where you have to sit down and say someone is looking for a specific outcome, because when you begin to start manipulating the data, when you begin to start not taking random and selectively picking out certain variables that you want, you are controlling the outcome in a manner that it's not designed to do, and you're no longer getting an actual statistical analysis. You're just basically projecting ideas to an outcome that you want. And this is why when it comes down to dealing with these things, you have to follow the proper protocol in order to get good results. And I've seen this over the last few years, especially magnified, how statistics are being used in a wrong manner to justify what people want, regardless of the situation that it's in. And this is highly unethical, and now people are beginning to pay for it in a very bad way, which is what then came to you when they started to manufacture all of these things to inflate the numbers to come in to justify doing this. And this is intent, because each step of the way they're doing something they know that they shouldn't when you're performing these things, because they drill these things into your head during school when you're learning these things, that you shouldn't do these things. So why are they doing this, especially when it comes to the government?
Yeah. So see, they created a narrative that, hey, at Poplar Avenue Clinic, at our clinic, everybody was getting hysteroscopy. Okay. What the actual trial data from our experts showed that 41,000 clinic visits, patient did not have hysteroscopy. So they excluded those patients. And
Mm-hmm.
when they were asked, hey, why did you exclude patients who did not have hysteroscopy? They said, well, it was not relevant for our case. It was, it is so mind-boggling that it's hard to believe. Is that, you're taught in school that if you're going to look at the data, let's say you have a pie chart, you got
Yes.
to look at the entire clinic's patient population, right?
Yes.
As to how many patients are having hysteroscopy. Why would you exclude patients who didn't have hysteroscopy? Because that doesn't align with your allegation. That's why you are excluding that. But then that is a selective truth telling, right? You're not
Yes.
telling the entire picture. You're
Yes.
basically excluding thousands and thousands of patients, 40,000 visits where no hysteroscopy happened, and those calculations were excluded from the analysis.
I
So
I
I found it very, very baffling.
Yes, and I worked in healthcare when I was young. I was a healthcare aide. I was actually going to become a doctor, but then I had my oldest daughter, and then I ended up having to switch careers, and then I ended up getting into engineering. I was a heavy duty mechanic for a while, and then I went into engineering later. But I understand the procedures of when you're talking about the
Hysteroscopy. Hysteroscopy.
hysteroscopy, because we used to take a camera and, for example, and stick it inside of an engine or a transmission, because it was, you couldn't just rip it apart to figure it out. And the same principle applies to a human being, especially even more so because you can't just start ripping things out of a person to figure things out. So it makes sense that you want to go in and look to see what's going on. If you can do that, it's not a very invasive procedure. You don't have to cut anybody open. You do it inside, like you said, inside of the office, instead of having to send somebody inside of a hospital to do something even worse. So you're actually doing things that are preventative, that are less invasive to help people. And then you're in an area where the demographics, because I actually went to school in at Oakwood at Huntsville, Alabama. So I'm familiar with the
Okay.
Tennessee area, right?
Yeah.
Memphis and Nashville, fundamentally very different, right? So
Very
you're
different.
looking at very different demographics. You're listening, like Nashville is a much wealthier city as opposed to Memphis, which is more poverty. And then when you're looking at the bordering states and so forth, so you're having a very different demographic. So you're looking at more of a higher risk population when you're looking at the socioeconomic status and so forth. So these are all things that you would expect to see in those kinds of situations where you're going to see higher risk for something like when you're looking at obesity, because obesity is very much tied to poverty, because when you don't make much money, you eat what's available, and what's available and cheap is not very good. The education is down, and all these things that affect them. So none of this, it appears from what you're telling me, none of this is being considered, and they're taking and manipulating information. Now, my question is why? Because I want to know why. Because the what I'm hearing from what you're talking about, what I've looked at, it doesn't look very good. And the government should never be bringing this, because when you're bringing a criminal complaint, it should be beyond a reasonable doubt. But when you're doing these shoddy steps and using this as your basis, this is a problem. This is a very big problem.
Yep. And see, so they started with a baseline allegation of overutilization of services, right? And then they added multiple layers of charges on top of that. So the most salacious ones that they added were charges of sexual abuse, sexual misconduct, human trafficking, and rape. And they didn't, clarify right in the beginning to everybody that what was the basis of it, because the media picked it up and the media just went crazy. Media went into a media frenzy that, hey, human trafficking and all these salacious charges, and why is that happening? And people looked at them like anybody would look, a normal person. Well, uh, as my attorney said, as you peel the onion, you figure out that, whoa, there was actually never any basis of sexual assault, human trafficking, rape, nothing. All that they were doing was they were hypothesizing that if they can prove that a procedure was medically unnecessary according to their criteria, which by the way are non existent, um, then they could classify this as a fraudulent procedure according to Medicare, Medicaid. And since fraudulent penetration of female genitalia is rape, and hysteroscopy is a procedure on female genitalia, so one could be charged with rape.
That okay, that doesn't even make sense, even with their what they're
It
following
doesn't.
their logic, because doing a medical procedure that isn't necessary is not the same as trying to force someone to have sexual intercourse. It's like, okay, you did something that wasn't necessary. You made money off of something that wasn't necessary. Is this difference than trying to force yourself onto someone? It's a fundamentally different thing, because if you're doing this, you're probably not just doing it only in that procedure. You're probably going to be doing it in other procedures. So, like, this is,
Yeah. So obviously they were trying to stretch the statute
yes,
to go where the facts were just not there, right? Also, let's talk about medical necessity for a second. So when these procedures happened, the patients were consented. Patients actually gave consent to have the procedure done. All right. So once the procedure was done, 5 years later, they're coming back and saying, by the way, we hired a chart reviewer, and according to the chart reviewer's opinion, this procedure was not medically necessary, according to the insurance criteria. Now, let me give you an example. Medicare, Medicaid typically doesn't cover infertility services, right?
yes,
So does that make the infertility services medically unnecessary? No, it doesn't, because
no.
the patient still requires it. Whether one insurance company covers a certain procedure, another one doesn't cover a certain procedure, it has nothing to do with what the patient is desiring.
Well,
You know, when as a physician, when you see a patient, you have a discussion. If the patient chooses a procedure to be done, then you figure out whether the patient has capability to pay or no insurance, what are the insurance criteria, things like that, right?
yes.
Now, that has nothing to do with the basic necessity of a procedure. Otherwise, why are all the infertility physicians are not in jail? Tell me.
Well, yes, unnecessary would be what the patient didn't want, right? Like
That's
if
right.
you did something that there was no basis for doing and no justification. So I can understand that. But if the patient this is what they came to you for, and you're
Yes.
providing them what they asked for, and you're not breaking the law, like doing something criminal. So what's the issue?
Not only that, not only that, we actually diagnosed numerous cancers with hysteroscopy. We diagnosed numerous diseases, tumors, fibroids, polyps, why people were, having heavy bleeding, removing the IUDs. I mean, we provided legitimate treatment, and those indications are well documented in our charts, and patients were consented, just like regular consent. And even the more egregious part about this is when the services were actually happening, okay, these procedures and the charts were evaluated with long ongoing audits, and we got great emails, great letters saying, hey, thank you so much for doing such a good job for our patients. Meaning, when the services were happening and the patients were needing them, they were happy that we were providing those services. But except that when they wanted to charge us, then suddenly they started finding reasons why a certain procedure after the fact was not indicated. And the chart reviewer that they hired produced a very, very flawed review. You'll be surprised to know that the chart reviewer that they hired actually doesn't do office hysteroscopy. So how can you give an opinion and an expert narrative on a procedure that you yourself actually don't do in the office? Think
Yeah,
about that.
yes. We got to take a short break. I just got to play a commercial, but we'll come back on the other side because we really need to discuss this, because what is being done is wrong, and it just this I we'll talk about it after the break. We'll just take a short break and get into it.
Yes, yes.
Cario, co-founder of Mark37.com. I spent my career in Silicon Valley working for high-tech infrastructure companies, and I've witnessed firsthand the surveillance apparatus they've built. Most of you already know we're in a digital war right now, but are you really aware that we're trying to fight this war with the weapons and tools of the enemy? That Android or iPhone in your pocket, that MacBook or Windows laptop, it's a tracking device feeding everything you say and do to companies that want you under their control or eliminated entirely. Every text, call, location, even how long you pause on a post, they track it all and use complex algorithms to then use this data to manipulate your behavior. If you knew someone hacked your devices and was selling your data without your consent, you'd be furious and terrified. So why are you okay with these companies doing this to you right now? Here's what they don't want you to know. There is another way. At Mark37.com, we offer phones, laptops, tablets, and even basic flip phones, all running systems big tech can't access unless you explicitly give them access. And what's even better is you also don't need to sacrifice productivity. I'm one of thousands of geeks mobilized across this country, building tools and providing education and support to help you live anonymously online before they enforce digital ID. Go to mark37.com. Sign up for a free 30-minute digital privacy consultation. Join hundreds of thousands who have decided to stop feeding their data to companies actively working to enslave us. Take back your communications. Take back your data. And may God bless you on your journey.
Yeah, so if anybody wants to go ahead and go and get one of these phones, go to mark37.com. Use the promo code CARES to get 5% off. I've got myself one of these phones, and now I've, transitioning away from being tracked because, at the end of the day, the government is going too far. And, kind of circling back to your situation here, when I look at this, the government is now coming here and coming after you, and people are fabricating evidence. They're creating the statistics, manipulating the statistical information to present a certain narrative. The question is why? Because these guys are doing it, somebody's doing it for a reason. The people that are doing this, there's a reason behind it. Because what you're doing is providing a service to people that is necessary. You're helping people. You're actually going out and doing things out of pocket, not even turning people away who need this type of help. So this is the deranged part. You're helping people who can't help themselves, and people are preventing you. The government is trying to punish you for doing this. This is an egregious weaponization of the justice system. And unfortunately, I hate to say this, but I've seen this often. People who are going out and trying to help other people are getting punished by the government. This is the question is why? Because when I have to start asking questions when I see these types of things happening over and over again. I have to sit down and think that the government, there are people who are having very bad intentions in the government that are doing things because this is what to do this to you. There's a long chain of events that had to take place to get to where you are. And now they came in and they arrest you. What happened when they came in and charged you?
Yep. So remember, the medical board had dismissed this case. So they actually complained to the medical board with the same allegations. The medical board conducted an independent investigation, a comprehensive review, interviewed witnesses, and then sent me a very nice letter in September of 2024 that, hey, this case is being dismissed. There's no wrongdoing. Okay? So after the medical board dismissed the case, as a physician and as a surgeon, I have no reason to believe that the case is still going on because I believe the medical board. The medical board is the regulating body that regulates the practice of medicine and advises what to do, what not to do.
Who
If there's a
complained?
medical issue,
Who complained to the medical board?
the FBI.
The FBI brought it to the medical board?
Correct.
How did they?
The FBI filed a written complaint to the medical board
Who
with
brought?
these allegations.
Who brought it to the attention of the FBI?
That's the government.
But I know, but who
The
brought?
FBI was already,
But somebody had to inform the FBI, or like they
yeah.
just. So how did that happen?
I believe it was the U.S. Attorney's Office that got the FBI involved. And the U.S. Attorney's Office was informed by the calculators in the insurance system, the Medicare and Medicaid, that this clinic is an outlier. You got to look into it, things of that nature. So then the raid happens at the clinic in April 2024. After that, the FBI files a complaint to the medical board. The medical board investigates and dismisses the case. And I think case is over. That happens in September. So then in February of 2025, they suddenly arrest me. As I'm walking to the hospital to start my surgeries on a Friday morning, they suddenly come in and they arrest me and they unseal the indictment. Basically, first 4 counts are sexual abuse, illegal sex acts, human trafficking, rape, and things of that nature with zero basis. So they arrest me, they put me in an isolation cell, solitary cell. And it's a long weekend, so I remain there. I have absolutely no clue what's going on outside. And, the media is just going crazy. They've already branded me, a horrible person, and things of that nature, basically murdered my reputation. And, I get out on bond and then start fighting the case. So that's kind of how it progressed. These sexual charges remained on the docket for almost 6 months, and then they were eventually dropped in October of 2025. But the time period between February of 2025 through October of 2025, media was just constantly running these stories: human trafficking, sexual abuse, things of that nature.
The damage is
And
already
basically,
done.
yeah, the damage is already done. I mean, how do you recover from that type of allegation coming from the government and just circulating all around? Even now, if you read the press,
Yes,
you'll find it.
yes, yes. I saw. I did a Google search and I saw this, and this is it. Once that is done, it still doesn't matter because people are gonna in their minds it's poison. Some people might go, okay, you know what? I see what happened. It was this was wrong, and the government was wrong. But then there's people in their mind. No matter what you say, it's poison.
Yeah, that's the thing with these type of allegations, that for a male gynecologist to level allegations like that, it's just damaging beyond belief. It's an atrocity, and it's a nightmare scenario. Um, so then the case progressed, and then also they alleged mishandling of equipment, that the surgical devices were not being cleaned properly, or they were being reused and things of that nature. What is surprising about that, though, is that all the devices that they presented to the court actually don't work. Think about that. How do you use a device that doesn't work?
You can't.
You can't. You can't. You can't use the device that doesn't work. So all these devices were functional. A lot of the non-functional. All these devices were non-functional. They were not working. Some of the devices were literally broken in two. Like if I break this pen in two, that's how the device was appearing. How can you use such a device for a procedure? So we filed a bill of particulars motion that, hey, tell us um, what device is allegedly used on what patient on what date, and to prove reuse, then you gotta prove that the same device is then used on a different patient on a different date for a different procedure, right? That sounds logical sequence
Yes.
of events. And our motions were rejected that no, the government does not need to prove either use or reuse of a device.
That's not.
So make any sense to us. It doesn't make any sense um, that and if you read all the press, just like the sexual charges, all the press is about reusing devices.
Yes.
But then we got a documentation that, oh, government does not need to prove reuse of a device. But if you look at the press, it's saying exactly that. So again, it's so convoluted that I'm unable to understand it.
This is a pattern of behavior that I've watched over multiple cases, whether it's criminal, civil, whatever. You're seeing the state coming in, and the state is treated like their words are absolute truth, and then the person that's coming before and contesting the state's narrative is working from the position of being guilty until proven innocent, and then the courts are restraining the ability of the person to provide a defense and taking away their right to due process. This is where now the court is now beginning to exercise will and then force, because they're placing you into situations where you lose your freedom, and the court's not allowed to do that. They're only supposed to exercise judgment based on the facts and the law, and everybody has the right to due process, because you cannot take away somebody's life, liberty, or property without due process of law. So when they're taking away your ability to defend yourself and raise grounds and make the state prove their case, they're wrong. And then you went ahead and got convicted. This is like, I was one of the cases I put in the petition where a woman got convicted, and they refused to put in the evidence, and then at the sentencing they had to put a continuing, because they're like, oh well, the state didn't provide the body cam footage, and they wouldn't let her put in her footage of the video that would have reflected what was on the body cam. And so now they have to go ahead and say, well, maybe this is a Brady violation. Like, now, these things should not happen. They should not.
Yeah.
And that's the problem.
And let me tell you a few general things about our case, which is the allegation was that, oh, Dr. Kumar instructed staff to reuse a specific device, and he should not have done that. However, if you actually look at my emails to the staff, they clearly state that, hey, you can reuse the device, but the device I'm talking about is actually a multi-use device. You follow my point? So yes, I'm giving instructions for proper processing and follow the rule of law and reuse a multi-use device. Yes, I definitely passed that instruction. However, we were blocked from entering that email into evidence. And the
That,
narrative was generated that some reason these instructions apply for single-use devices. No, they don't. They apply to multi-use devices. In our field, we have rigid scopes. Those are metallic scopes. They look like this. And we have flexible scopes that can bend.
yes,
And then we have lots of other, brands of equipment that is single use. And mind you, even single use devices have single use components and multi use components. So there's a
yes,
monitor you can reuse, there's a cannula that don't reuse, use
yes,
it and throw it, obviously after decontamination.
yes,
The second thing was before you throw a device, you're supposed to decontaminate this according to the CDC guidelines, right?
Yeah.
So
Yes.
CDC, if you look at CDC biohazard disposal guidelines,
Yes.
if you read that document, on point number 4, the very first line says, before you throw a device, decontaminate it so that it's safer to be handled by downstream workers, like
Yes.
people who pick up biohazard. You don't want
Yes.
them to get injured, right?
No.
You don't want them to get, infection and things like that. So you have to decontaminate these devices.
Yes.
So when these devices were there in Sidex for decontamination, they were taken it as, oh, they were there because they could have been reused on a patient. That's why it was important for us to ask for proof that, okay, if you're alleging device reuse, tell us which patient, which device, which date, and then the same device goes to which patient, which device, which date, right? But in absence of that, how can you determine? So that's why we had filed a motion that, hey, you're converting this into a crime of intent. Crime of intent means the device is literally sitting right there in, let's say, a bin that contains Sidex, right? So this device is sitting there. They seized this device, the feds took this device away, and then placed an allegation that this device was being reused. And then we asked, okay, reused on which patient, which date, which specific device? So they will not give us this information and completely ignore the fact that if you look at the CDC guidelines, the device is in there for decontamination before it can be thrown away. Then look at other factors, like let's say, what if a student was playing with this device and placed the device in the bucket of Sidex, and they were just using it to educate themselves, right? What
Yes.
if this device came from a medical assistant who was doing whatever demonstration, or who was just checking the connection on the device, whether it works or not, numerous other things. And what if, a medical representative came to the clinic, placed the device after checking it? What if that happened? So there are just so many scenarios that are not covered in the litigation that are possible, and that's why this type of proof was important, but we were never given that type of proof.
This is the more I listen, the more I'm seeing that you were prevented from bringing certain avenues forward so that they could get a desired outcome. The same way they manipulated the statistics, they're manipulating the court process for a desired outcome, because this is like they had the people who are dealing with this had an outcome that they wanted and did what they needed to get there, because you're getting these are common sense questions that somebody that would look at this would understand. You don't have to be a doctor to understand these things. When somebody's saying that you have something sitting in a bucket and this is being reused, you need to demonstrate that it was being reused. You can't just sit down and start making stuff up, because I can walk in anywhere and start making up whatever I want. But does that mean that the evidence demonstrates that this is true? And this is the problem. They're not being able to demonstrate, and they're like, well, they don't have to prove that case. Well, of course they do. If you're trying to take away somebody's liberty, you have to prove that case.
Yeah. Not only that, these devices that were seized were actually broken. Like there were devices that are literally like in two parts. How do you
Mm.
use that device? They're all non-functional. They don't work. So how do you use a device that doesn't work?
That's
Yeah.
that you can't.
And when you start looking at producing evidence that, okay, let's see this device, which was the patient on which this device was used, and then the same device, which was the other patient where this device was used, that forces you to take those steps and to think that what is the evidence here, you know? But that was never done. That was never, we were told that the government doesn't need to prove use or reuse. We had a defense expert who analyzed the devices, and he opined that, these devices are broken. There is no proof beyond a reasonable doubt that these devices have actually been used, let alone reuse.
They,
So
they,
he said, I cannot conclude based on microtrace analysis that these devices were actually even used on a patient. It may be that somebody opened the device, played with it, put it in the Cydex bin for discarding at a certain point, and that's it. When these devices were picked up, I was not even in the clinic. I was physically in the hospital doing my surgeries. And there was construction going on in the clinic. So who knows who placed what device where at the time of construction? I mean, you've had construction at home. I've had construction at home. When there are multiple construction workers, floating around, sometimes they don't tell you where they put stuff.
no. And I deal with engineering. We have to go in and we work with construction and so forth and building things, and things can go all over the place.
Yes.
This is unreasonable. But the the government, they have an obligation. Like, the Constitution isn't a suggestion for the government. It's a restraint on what they can do, and they have to follow it. But the problem is, what we're seeing is that the government isn't following it. The court here, the judge, is responsible for this, because it doesn't matter what the prosecution says the state wants to say. The court can't allow them to do that, because the prosecution has to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. That's part of due process. If you can't prove your case, then you don't get the charge. End of story. You can't sit down and say, well, I don't have to prove my case, and the judge can't sit down and agree the state doesn't have to prove his case on a certain element. That's nonsense. It's the state is asking for your liberty to be deprived, and they have to have a reason for it. They can't just be like, oh, well, no, too bad, we don't have to prove anything. That's not the way it works. This is the problem. It's not the fact of the decision that was made. It was the process that was used to get that decision, because when you manipulate the process, then you're going to get an unfavorable outcome. And that's the problem. They are manipulating the process in a way that's constitutionally not sanctioned. Not at all.
Yep. I'll tell you another example. So there's this major CDC document. The title is Disinfection and Sterilization in Healthcare Facilities. And I'm focusing on the device use right now. If you read the document, the document is about 160 pages. On page 81, there's one page summary on the state of the science on use of single-use devices, right? If you look at the last 3 lines, it clearly states in there that the FDA guidance about these devices does not apply to following scenarios. Scenario number 1 is unpackaged, unused, single-use device. The FDA regulation doesn't apply. Next scenario is that this regulation only applies to acute care hospitals. It doesn't apply to healthcare settings other than acute care hospitals.
Mm-hmm.
How would you interpret that? It basically means at physician offices, outpatient clinics, even that guidance doesn't apply.
Yes.
But the important thing is we were blocked from introducing that into evidence. We were blocked from introducing the CDC guidelines, which I heavily relied on, into evidence.
So the very protocols that you were following given by the government, they blocked you from bringing those in so that you demonstrate that you were following the protocols that they're saying that you're violating, that they're charging you for.
Yeah, yeah. Going a step further, then we said, hey, we feel like this is kind of like an entrapment by estoppel, which means that on one hand, government is telling you to do something, and then on the other hand, when you're doing that, government is saying, hey, no, don't do that. And then you can be charged for it. So, for example, another major point of contention in the trial was high-level disinfection. So the government took the position throughout the trial that uterus is a sterile cavity. Anything that goes in the uterus must be sterile. And sterile means sterile. Anything less than sterile is dirty. Okay? Now, they charged this particular hysteroscope. It's called the Olympus HYF XP. That's the name of the hysteroscope. They charged that. If you read the instruction for use, the IFU document of this hysteroscope, it clearly says multiple times, repeatedly, that this device can be used either with high-level disinfection or with sterilization. And then CDC says that for semi-critical devices, sterilization provides no added benefit, and high-level disinfection is acceptable means of processing these devices. Okay?
Okay.
Government held the position and produced a FDA authority on the stand who said the FDA has never cleared a hysteroscope that can be used with any other method than sterilization. All hysteroscopes must be sterilized. In other words, this FDA authority on the stand under oath basically contradicted the document that has been cleared by her own agency. Okay? So again, you are back to square one. On one hand, the government tells you to do something, but then when you do that, the government can charge you for it. So for example, the government agency, the FDA, publishes instruction for use document. These are like product inserts. If you take aspirin, you get a
Yes.
product insert.
Yeah,
Right?
yes.
You're going to read the product insert, and you will try to do what you need to do after reading the product insert, right?
Yes.
So that's the governmental instruction. But then when you do that, they'll come on the other hand and say, this is a crime, you should not have done that. So that's the entrapment by estoppel, is that on one hand, government tells you to do something. On the other hand, when you do that, you can be charged with a crime. So that's where I say, 3 felonies a day, the book, comes to my mind. Have you read
Yes.
that book, 3
No.
felonies a day?
No, I haven't.
So apparently, a legal scholar published this book, and the book says average American citizen would have committed 3 felonies every day on an average. This is
Yes.
how overbearing and complex the laws
Yes.
have become,
Yes.
that if you're violating a law, you don't even know that you're doing it.
Yes. I see that, and a lot of people don't realize how the laws are, and I see people breaking the law all the time. But some of the laws that they actually have, they don't make sense, and they shouldn't have them. And I'm a person that you should have the principles of certain laws and have to have demonstrable harm, and those principles need to be applied. When you start getting micromanaging and putting all of these laws and codes and regulations, it becomes overbearing, and that just becomes ridiculous. So that if they want to charge you, they can, and if they don't want you to get charged, they can. And that's not the way the law should work. The law should have a consistent application. You should be able to apply the principle to the situation. Because when you look at a situation you should be able to tell from that situation whether or not some harm has occurred, whether there was intent or not, or when somebody was doing something wrong. But now they're taking things and they're taking these same laws and saying, well, oh, this, even though this told you this over here said something different, but because you followed this and not this, we're going to charge you, even though this was something that we put out. So they're giving you contradicting things, and they're saying, well, if you follow one or the other, at any point in time, if we feel like it, we can charge you.
Yeah.
That's insane. You can't do that. How do you, that's I don't even know what to say. This is angering watching these types of things happening, because what people should understand is that it's not just going to happen to Dr. Kumar. It's going to happen to anybody else, because if you let this happen, it will happen again and again and again. We can't. These things have to stop.
Yeah.
This.
If you follow the case of Dr. Raj Bothra, he was locked in for 3 years without any crime. If you look at, Ron Elfenbein's case, I don't know whether you have had an opportunity to speak with him.
Yes, I did.
You should, yeah. And, similar situation, very, very similar pattern. You almost feel like you're getting punished for doing your job.
Yes.
Hysteroscopy is in the line of duty. Supposed to take actions that can help in diagnosis of early cancer, can save lives, and things of that nature, can help us diagnose uterine disease and things like that. And when you're trying to do that, you could be charged with overutilization. What if your population is high risk? What if your criteria are different than, the expert that lives, a different city, and your patient populations are totally different? If the other chart reviewer does not perform this procedure in the office, but you do, you see a totally different spectrum of patients. It should not be a crime.
Well, this is.
It's called a practice variation. Some people do it, other people don't. You can't force everybody to practice the exact same way.
Well, as long as it works for them in their setting, this is what matters. Like, I mean, for me, like, my background was in HVAC infection controls for like the mechanical engineering, and this, when I ended up having the issue with the government, was because my problem was like, I don't want people to die. What you put out was wrong. If I did this, I would go to prison. So I'm going to do what I know is right to protect people, because at the end of the day, if Johnny loses his life and can't go back to his family, don't want to live with that. Like, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do something so that each person has a reasonable chance of getting home without me increasing the chances that they don't. And this is the type of thing that people are getting punished for. I'm seeing this happening all over. Then I have to sit down and ask myself this question: why are people who are trying to protect the lives of people getting punished for it? Because this doesn't make sense. The only thing I can sit down and say is maybe some people are going to benefit from people not getting the help that they need. And that's a serious question that we have to start asking, because when I see these things, there's some incentive for people not to get the help that they need. Why they're doing these things. The government is doing these things.
That's right.
I don't even know what to say. This is very difficult to listen to see this happening.
Yes.
Because there are people that are committing all kinds of crimes and walking out onto the streets and getting away with it. And someone who's trying to do their job and help disadvantaged people at that, so that they can have a better opportunity to life, and you're getting punished for it. And then the government is protecting it over and over again. So where is it now where you're at? Because you said that you went through the case, and then they said that they found you guilty. And then what happened after that?
Yes, the case right now is in the post-trial proceedings. So after the verdict, we had certain events that happened that I'm not able to disclose because they remain under seal.
Yes.
So post-trial proceedings are going on that remain under seal. So that's where things are right now with the case.
How long have these proceedings been going on? The post-trial proceedings.
For the past couple of months.
Okay. So they've sealed them and you're trying to get them unsealed. Is that what's happening?
We intend to file motions to unseal them, if possible, because I think it will be good for public to learn what is going on.
Well, why what would be the point of sealing if they found you guilty and they say now they're going with the post, which usually goes to the sentencing and so forth? Why would they want to keep all of that sealed? That in itself, people are going to be like, well, why would you do that? If you proved your case, what do you need to hide for?
That's a great question, isn't it? So I don't know, and neither can I speculate on that.
Yes.
But that is what is happening. The post-trial motions are under seal, post-trial proceedings,
But this
and that
oh, go ahead, sorry.
yeah, and that's all that I can actually say because the
Yeah.
proceedings are under.
Yes, and I know the question. That's the question. First question that came to my mind when you said this. I'm like, well, if you proved your case, why do you need to seal things now? Like, I mean, if everything was transparent, why do you need to hide? And this is where the issue is, because justice has to be seen, because in order to ensure that it's done, so that somebody could come back and look at your case and say, okay, well, they did this, and this. The prosecution brought their case, the defendant did not, right? But that's not the case of what we're seeing. And when you're seeing these things, that's telling you justice isn't being served. And this is a huge problem. So what ends up happening? Where do you go from here now with this, where you're at?
Yeah, I mean, right now we just wait and for the court to take the next step. And then once everything is final, then we intend to appeal. We intend to appeal the verdict. We intend to appeal the case.
Let me ask you a question. How much has this cost you in legal fees? Like the to
Oh,
defend yourself?
multiple millions of dollars. Multiple millions of dollars.
Oh, it, and this is where the process is the punishment,
Yeah.
right? Because they come to you.
Yeah, it's basically, destroyed my life. The clinic is closed, and it's just been an absolute nightmare.
So the you so now the people that were getting the help are not getting what the help that they needed.
One of the patients stated that in the court that, hey, it is very difficult to gain access to good clinics. And so we know obviously there's great barriers to access to good healthcare. And you
Yes.
can only imagine every 10 minutes a new endometrial cancer case is getting diagnosed. I mean, since we've been on this podcast, that means, 6 or 7 cases have already been diagnosed. So you would rather be trying to help people rather than restrict the care and the access.
Yeah. This is terrible. Like, I mean, people need to share this, and that needs to become aware of this. This is something that needs to get dealt with, because we can't have these things happen anymore. And just as we wrap up here, how can people help you, and where can they reach you?
Yes, please follow me on X. Try to spread this educational material as widely as you can. And definitely don't stay passive, become active, take active part, and ask questions. Ask questions. Like you asked several great questions. Um, the first part of the process is asking the question. And hopefully, once we ask question, we can get the machinery moving in order to get some answers.
Oh yes, answers definitely need to have, and they need to have accountability, because you can't allow these types of things to happen, because you don't have judge doesn't have a discretion to take away your due process. They don't have a discretion to go ahead and put somebody in a position where they're going to lose their freedom without due process. This is not what it's designed to do, and it needs to go back. And the people that are supposed to fix this is Congress. This is a Congress and an executive branch need to fix this problem. So I'm gonna close here with a prayer and thank you guys for coming. Yes. Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for this day. We thank you for your love, your grace, and mercy. And Lord, we see the situation that is going on here with Dr. Kumar. Lord, work this out, that he would get his freedom and have things restored to him. And Lord, watch over all the men and the women that are standing up for doing what is right, and help the people to come together to rebuild our families, our churches, our community, and our nation, that we can have some protection and for everyone who is being abused, and especially for the children, is my prayer. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
All right.
Thank you.
Yes, thank